Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend for yielding. The goal of the negotiations between world powers and Iran has always been to prevent them from developing a nuclear weapon. And I think we have to be realistic about this. This agreement, as opposed to rejecting the agreement, takes us very far toward that goal, and I think accomplishes that goal in a way that we should all be able to live with and accept. The alternative is just too treacherous, I think, for us to even imagine. I've been involved in this issue for as long as I've been here, the last 2.5 years that I've been in Congress. I have, as many members have had, countless hours of briefings. I have read the documents. I have read the classified reports. And I'm confident that this agreement, simply put, makes the world a safer place, both for the U.S. and our allies. What this agreement does not do, however, and I think it's important to keep in context, this agreement does not make Iran a good actor on the world stage. It's intended to tamp down their nuclear aspirations. It doesn't mean that Iran can be trusted. In fact, the very nature of the agreement is that it will rely on inspections. It will rely on the eyes of the world to be on Iran to ensure that the agreement is adhered to with robust inspections. But like any negotiated agreement, it's not perfect. But if Iran cheats, we will know it through inspections. If Iran violates the agreement, our allies and the United States will be able to put back in place those sanctions that were so important to get them to the negotiating table in the first place. And in fact, even if our allies don't agree, we would have the ability to unilaterally take steps to reinstate those important sanctions. Finally, I think importantly, under this question, the U.S. will be in a much stronger position than we are today if, in fact, military intervention ultimately is required, because we will have allowed the diplomatic process to work. I believe, and I think most Americans believe, it strengthens our hand, it strengthens our standing in the world if, in fact, the necessity of military action does come upon us. The fact that we gave diplomacy a chance, I think, is a really important point. Now, I know, and I've heard from friends on both sides of the aisle, concern about the Americans that are being held. And this is a subject that I know something about. I represent the family of Amir Hekmati. And I appreciate the efforts of members on both sides to call upon Iran to release the Americans that they hold. And I personally thank Chairman Royce for his effort through his leadership on the Foreign Affairs Committee to assist me in developing a resolution that allowed this House to speak with one voice on that question. But it would be a mistake, as some have suggested, to have included the freedom of innocent Americans as one of the provisions of an agreement, because by the very nature of an agreement, through negotiation, in order to a concession, in order to secure the release of those Americans in exchange for something else that was negotiated at the bargaining table, we would have had to exchange something that makes the world a less safe place. But don't take my word for it. Listen to the position taken by that young, brave man that I represent, that young Marine, Amir Hekmati, who himself has said that the onus is on Iran to unilaterally release him and not to include him as part of a transaction that deals with Iran's nuclear capabilities. That's the position that I take, because I think it's the right position. But I think it's important to note that that's also the position that this brave young man, who for 4 years has been sitting in an Iranian jail cell, also takes. Finally, we have to be honest with ourselves about the question that is before us. Now, if I were to have written this agreement by myself, it would be a different agreement. And I'm sure that's true of virtually everybody in this House. But the fact of the matter is, when evaluating our position on this question, we have to first search our own conscience, but we have to measure the effect of this agreement and the consequences of adhering to and enacting this agreement with the consequences of walking away from a multilateral negotiated agreement with no prospect. Listen to the voices of the other nations involved, with no prospect of being able to come back to the negotiating table. The conclusion, I think, that I have come to in examining my conscience is that we are in a far better position as a world, and we are far more secure through this agreement than we would be with the uncertainty of walking away from the diplomatic process and allowing Iran to pursue a nuclear weapon in the next months.
I'll yield to the gentleman 30 extra seconds.
Thank you. I thank my friend for yielding. This is the conclusion that I have come to, but this is also the conclusion that experts on both sides of the political spectrum have come to. Ambassadors from across the world, former secretaries of state, Madeleine Albright thinks this is the right path forward. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell thinks this is the right path forward. I understand that individuals in this House may come to different conclusions after examining the facts. The only thing I ask and encourage my colleagues to do is to vote your heart, vote what you think is right, examine the documents, and do what you think is in the best interest of this country and of the world. And the conclusion that I have come to is that supporting this agreement is the right